The salvage freighter Kestrel's reach was about as glamorous as a rusted-out soup can with delusions of grandeur. It creaked when it turned, hissed when it cooled, and occasionally sparked for dramatic effect when nothing was actually wrong. Its pilot, mechanic, cook, and reluctant janitor, Theo Morrow, had long since made peace with the ship's moods. He often talked to it like an old dog, loving, weary, and with a healthy dose of sarcasm. Just once, he muttered, smacking a panel near the nav controls, "Could we not simulate a hull breach when I'm halfway through heating up noodles?" The ship responded with a shrill beep, which Theo interpreted as a solid maybe. He sighed and wiped oil from his hands, glancing out the front viewport at the dead stretch of space they were floating through. Nothing but asteroid husks and the drifting bones of ships that hadn't fared as well as his. It was supposed to be a quiet day. Theo liked quiet days. No screaming pirates, no rogue AI, no mysterious cargo that turned out to be sentient and allergic to sarcasm. Just salvage work, alone, in the echoing hum of deep space. It was predictable, safe, boring. So of course, that's the moment the proximity alarm went off. Theo startled so hard he knocked over his mug. Okay, I hear you. Relax, he shouted at the ship as he lunged toward the console. A red blip pulsed against the radar, a small object, drifting slow, no power signature, but not debris either. A tight knot formed in his stomach. He leaned closer. Escape pod. He toggled the sensors. The pod was Varian in design, sleek, sharp-edged, and annoyingly smug in the way only Varian tech could be. It had once been matte silver, now scorched black in places, its surface pockmarked from micro-impacts. But it was intact, and worse, occupied. Theo hesitated, drumming his fingers on the console. He wasn't in the habit of rescuing people. People came with problems, needs, paperwork, but something about that blip made him pause. Maybe it was guilt, maybe curiosity, or maybe it was just because the last person he rescued tried to eat his left boot and he missed the excitement. He opened the cargo bay, extending the magnetic claw to pull the pod in. As it clunked into place, he threw on his jacket, half for protection, half because it made him feel slightly more heroic, and made his way down. The pod's hatch opened with a reluctant hiss, like even it knew this was a bad idea. Inside, nestled against a seat too large for her, was a child, blue skin, yellow eyes, long ears. She looked about 6, though with Varians it was hard to tell. She blinked up at him, wide-eyed, silent, limbs tucked in tight like a question he didn't have the answer to. "Well," Theo said, scratching his head, "you're not a toolbox." The child didn't respond, just stared. He crouched, careful, slow, offering a hand. "I'm Theo. I own this beautiful piece of junk. That sound you heard on the way in was probably the reactor grumbling about lunch. Happens around this time." She didn't laugh, didn't cry either, just stared like she was trying to understand a creature from another planet, which, to be fair, he was. "Okay, that's fair," he said, sighing. "No sudden moves, no jokes about plasma baths. Got it." He led her up through the ship, pointing things out in an overly cheerful voice that probably annoyed even the ship itself. "That's the kitchen/laboratory. Don't eat anything labeled 'do not eat.' I learned that the hard way. And that's the bathroom. You'll figure it out. Hopefully. Don't ask me about the plumbing." By the time he found a blanket and a warm patch of floor for her to rest on, she still hadn't spoken. But she was watching him, closely, with the kind of intensity that made him feel like she was evaluating his moral character, based solely on how well he folded laundry. He sat opposite her with a steaming cup of something vaguely coffee-like. She tilted her head. "Not poison," he said. "Probably." That earned him a blink. Progress. Over the next few days, the silence didn't break, but it changed. She followed him through the ship, mimicking his routines like a very confused shadow. He started calling her Kid because naming her felt too permanent, and she didn't seem to mind. He found her one morning rewiring a communications panel with surprising accuracy for someone who'd never spoken. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he started cooking more, talking more, joking more. "See this?" he'd say, pointing at a twisted hunk of metal. That's what happens when you tell a Korean oven that medium rare is a suggestion. Always read the manual, kid. One day she handed him a drawing. Stick figures. One tall, one small. The tall one had wild scribbles for hair. The small one had pointy ears. They were holding hands. He smiled, heart twisting. That me? The child peeked around the corner. Varela froze. Time bent. Air left the corridor. The girl was unmistakable. Blue skin, yellow eyes, ears long and perfect. She was dressed in an oversized ship shirt and holding a wrench like a teddy bear. She saw Varela, stopped, and then ran, not away, but toward Theo. She threw her arms around his leg and said with perfect clarity, "Papa." Varela blinked. Theo gave an awkward, lopsided smile. "Yeah, South, that happened." "You're a different species," Varela said, voice low and sharp. "Why is she calling you father?" Theo scratched his head. "I guess I give great hugs." She stepped forward, towering over both of them. "Where did you find her?" "Drifting, alone. No signal, no message. I took her in, fed her, patched her up. She is a Varian citizen. You had no right. Maybe not, but I had hands, a warm blanket, and the decency not to ask what she was worth on the black market. So I went on points." Virella stared at him. He didn't flinch. The girl looked up at her, eyes huge and uncertain. "Keela," Virella said, testing the name on her tongue. Theo raised an eyebrow. "You know her name." "She was reported lost." Theo tilted his head. "That's diplomatic. She nearly burned up in orbit." "She is not yours." "She seems to disagree." Keela leaned against Theo's leg, watching Virella like a kitten watches a thunderstorm. Virella turned away. "This is not resolved, not by a long shot." Theo nodded. "Fair. Want some protein mush while we argue about it? It's got hints of cardboard and despair." Her ears twitched. "That's not funny." "It is if you try the mush." They sat across from each other at the tiny table in the galley. Keela perched between them, swinging her legs. Varela examined Theo with surgical precision. "Why didn't you contact the Union?" He shrugged. "Didn't seem like the kind of place that lets a human walk away with one of their kids." "She's not one of our kids. She's someone important." Theo frowned. "She's 5. She likes terrible drawings and thinks I'm magic because I fixed a music box." The music box lay nearby, its once silver surface scratched but still functional. Keela picked it up, wound it, and held it out. The haunting Varian lullaby filled the room. Virella's eyes widened. Theo noticed. "That's hers, isn't it?" Virella didn't answer. Instead, she reached out slowly, and Keela let her take it. The melody drifted between them like a memory. Theo leaned back. "So now what?" Virella looked down at the child, then at him. She didn't have an answer. The silence in the galley stretched just long enough to become awkward. Theo scratched at the side of his neck, looked down at Keela, who had begun making tiny farting noises against the tabletop, then glanced up at Virella. She was still staring at the music box, not moving, ears slightly pulled back. It was an expression somewhere between reverence and indigestion. "So," Theo said eventually, "you planning to shoot me now or later?" Virella didn't look up. "Do you always talk like this?" "Only when I'm nervous. Or breathing." Keela giggled. "Papa said a bad word yesterday. He said hex bucket." Theo cleared his throat. "That was about the coffee machine. It tried to kill me." Virella finally lifted her gaze. "You bonded with her." "Wasn't a plan," he said. "Just happened. Like catching a cold, but warmer, and she makes less mucus." "She is of a high genetic tier," Virella said slowly. "One of the few with direct links to Varian prime blood. She should not be in the care of a mechanic with questionable hygiene. First of all, I shower every other day. Second, she had a broken arm, cracked ribs, and hypothermia when I found her. That was before the nightmares. If you want to call in some noble family now, they're late." Virella sighed, a sound that seemed to echo from the bones outward. "You are infuriating." "I get that a lot, usually right before people invite me to dinner anyway." She stood, setting the music box down gently. "She needs medical evaluation and answers. We need to return to my ship." Keela stiffened. "No!" Virella turned. "You don't have a choice." "She's scared," Theo said quietly. "And yeah, she's 5. But she remembers. The pod, the fire, the screaming. I have no intention of harming her. She nodded. He leaned back, trying to play it cool. Not bad. You forgot my tragic lack of fashion sense, but I'll let it slide. Then came the word. It was late, the ship dim and humming with sleep. He was tucking her into the hammock he'd rigged in the warmest corner of the ship. She reached out, held his sleeve, and said it. Papa. He froze, thought he misheard. Then she said it again. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and managed to dry. Well, I guess that makes me the captain of the dad squad now. She didn't laugh, but she smiled, and that for Theo was louder than anything. The ship kept floating through space, silent but watching. Somewhere stars turned without noticing. Somewhere else someone was probably looking for her. But for now, in the hum of the Kestrel's reach, with its cracked walls and patched floor, there was warmth, there was quiet, there was something dangerously close to peace. And in the background, a tiny voice whispered again, almost like a promise. Papa. The cruiser Varella's Edge glided through space like a silver blade, too elegant for war, too sharp for peace. Inside, Commander Varela paced the length of the operations deck with her arms folded behind her back and her ears twitching once every few seconds in irritation. The junior officers knew better than to mention it. They also knew better than to comment on her muttering, which at this point was mostly creative ways to insult the Union's intelligence division. Missing for 4 cycles, she muttered. No signal. No distress beacon. And now they send me. Not because I'm the best, no. Because I'm expendable if this turns out to be political sabotage. Again. Lieutenant Harana cleared her throat. Commander, we've locked onto an anomaly in the Sorn Belt. Faint but consistent. Matches Virian escape pod signatures. Varela narrowed her eyes. About time. Plot a course and tell the tech team if this turns out to be another automated decoy, I will personally staple them to the outer hull. The bridge crew pretended not to hear that. It was easier for morale. The journey to the Sorn Belt took 17 hours. During that time, Varela reread the mission file a dozen times. Technically, the file didn't say much. Just asset biological priority. Status, presumed adrift. Objective, retrieval. In other words, something important had gone missing, and no one wanted to admit how or why. She had suspicions, of course. The Virian Union had a fondness for secrets, especially when those secrets had ears longer than regulation helmets allowed. When they finally reached the source of the signal, it was hard to miss the ship. Kestrel's reach looked like someone had duct-taped 3 shuttles together and dared physics to complain. It was floating near a debris field, running dark, shields down, engines cold. Send a hailing ping, Varela ordered. The tech officer complied. Silence, then a crackle, then a voice. Hi, you've reached the personal salvage vessel Kestrel's Reach. I'm Theo. If you're here to complain about the noise last night, I promise it was the ship, not me. If you're selling Virian nutritional cubes, I'm still chewing the last one from 3 months ago. If this is the authorities, you've just missed me. Please leave a message. Varela stared. Is he joking? Ma'am, it appears to be a recorded message. I gathered that. Prepare the boarding team. I'm going in. She docked personally because if there was anything she trusted less than Union tech, it was other people's judgment. The Kestrel's Reach opened its hatch like a yawning beast. Inside, it smelled faintly of engine oil, recycled air, and something that might have been burnt toast or vengeance. She stepped into the corridor, drawing her sidearm, eyes scanning every corner. Hello? Came a voice. I hope that's you and not a murder bot. I haven't had coffee yet, and I'd hate to die groggy. Theo emerged from a side corridor, holding what looked like a wrench and wearing a shirt that read, Wrench it till it sparks. He blinked at her. You're tall. Varela raised one elegant brow. You're human. You noticed. Bonus points. She lowered her weapon slightly but didn't holster it. I'm looking for something, possibly someone. Theo leaned against the wall like this was all routine. Unless it's a 5-year-old mystery stain in the kitchen, I'm probably not your guy. Then soft footsteps. Small. Bare. The sound of something that trusted the floor not to vanish beneath it. You think she knows that? She's a kid. The last person in uniform put her in a box and forgot the air valve. Virella flinched visibly. It was subtle, but it happened. Theo softened. Look, I don't doubt you mean well, but right now I'm the guy who taught her how to eat cereal without using the ceiling. Let me come with you. She hesitated. Protocol is written by people who have never tried to keep a terrified alien toddler from licking engine coolant. Keela climbed up onto his lap, holding onto his shirt with a grip stronger than fear. She looked at Virella with wide, gold-ringed eyes. Please don't take me, she said. I don't want to go to the cold place. Virella's throat worked as she tried to form words. Finally, she said, then both of you will board Virella's edge, but you will stay out of restricted areas, and you will submit to a full bioscan. Deal, Theo said. Just don't let your crew dissect my toolbox. I have attachments. The transfer took place quickly. The docking corridors hissed and sighed like an old beast waking from a nap. Virella led the way, her stride a little stiffer than usual. Theo followed, holding Keela in one arm and his dented toolbox in the other. As they entered the pristine corridors of Virella's edge, he winced. Your floor's so clean, he muttered. I feel like I should take my shoes off, or apologize. One of the guards raised a brow. The other one didn't blink. Theo decided not to push it. Medical was a flurry of sterile white, blinking diagnostics, and an alien nurse named Soar, with 4 arms and the bedside manner of a slightly annoyed librarian. Keela clung to Theo like a heat patch while Soar muttered, Child's readings indicate minor anomalies. No embedded tech, no surveillance subdermals, no brain implants, and no dietary fiber, apparently. Theo gave a weak smile. We ran out of apples. She needs better food. You tell her that. I made space broccoli once, and she threatened to stage a mutiny. Virella watched the exchange from the side, her expression unreadable. Soar finished the scan, gave Keela a bright sticker shaped like a meteor, and waved them off with a grunt. In the corridor outside, Theo shifted Keela to his other arm. So, what now? We go to the bridge? I make awkward eye contact with everyone while they decide how much jail I deserve. You're not under arrest, Virella said. Yet. I didn't say that. She led him to a side room instead, bare, functional, with a single observation window and a projection table in the center. She activated it, and a hologram shimmered into life. A child's transport manifest. Theo leaned in. That's her. That's Keela. But the escort manifest's empty. There was one, Virella said. A body was found later. Pilot. Killed before launch. The child was meant to be taken to the house of Alarin. Foster placement? Royal ward. Theo blinked. Wait, she's... Yes. Keela, for her part, was now seated under the table playing with a wrench and occasionally announcing that she was building a rocket to go visit cows. Theo stared at the file. Why didn't anyone tell me this? You didn't ask. I was too busy stopping her from putting screws up her nose. Virella sighed. This complicates everything. Theo smiled. Welcome to parenthood. She pinched the bridge of her nose. I will need to speak with the High Court. Explain your involvement. Don't make it sound romantic. She ignored that. Until then, you will be under observation. You'll be given quarters. Keela, too. And if we refuse? Virella gave him a look. Do you really want to see the holding cells? Theo held up a hand. Not unless they come with cable and cookies. As they exited the chamber, Virella paused. One question, human. Why did you care? He looked at her, serious now. Because someone should have. Virella didn't answer, but her ears lowered slightly, like she'd been hit by a truth she didn't want to acknowledge. Then she turned and walked on. Keela tugged at Theo's sleeve. Papa? Yeah, squirt. Do I really have to eat space broccoli now? He smiled. Let's negotiate. The door to their assigned quarters whooshed open with the gentle sigh of compressed air and passive-aggressive judgment. Theo stepped inside carrying Keela on one hip, toolbox in the other, and a level of wariness reserved for people visiting in-laws. The room was absurdly clean, metallic, and tastefully bleak. A single cot, a console embedded in the wall, and a rectangular food dispenser that looked like it had feelings about what you ordered. Keela squirmed out of his arms and landed on the floor with a soft thump. She immediately declared, This place smells like robot farts, and began exploring. Theo dropped his toolbox on the floor with a grunt. Well, make yourself at home, Princess Mismatched Socks. I'm a pilot, she said, climbing onto the bed. This is my ship. You're my cook. Oh no, I am not signing up to make your idea of soup again. Last time you added jelly beans. They were spicy. They were not. She stuck out her tongue, then began crawling under the bed to look for monsters or smuggled candy, possibly both. Theo sat down heavily and leaned back against the wall. The room was too quiet. He'd spent too many nights in echoing silence like this, back when his ship's reactor had mood swings. He missed the hum of misbehaving machinery, missed grease stains and the comforting danger of a pipe bursting behind his head. A chime interrupted his thoughts. The console on the wall blinked once. Then it blinked again like it was trying to decide if he was worth the effort. Theo stood and hit the button. Yeah? Virella's voice crackled through. You're needed on Deck 4, briefing chamber. Am I about to be briefed or briefed? There was a long pause. Try not to say anything embarrassing. That's not a promise I can make. She cut the line. Theo looked down. Keela, stay here. Don't break anything. Don't rewire anything. And definitely don't tell the food dispenser to make space waffles. We remember what happened. She saluted from beneath the bed with one dusty hand. Aye, cook captain. He left before she could promote him to janitor. Deck 4 was an exercise in understatement. Matte gray walls, low lighting, and enough security cameras to make a conspiracy theorist weep with joy. Virella waited outside the chamber with her arms crossed, her uniform crisp and her ears alert. You took your time, she said. I had to argue with a 5-year-old about waffles. I lost. She turned and entered. He followed. Inside, the table glowed softly with a holographic display of star charts, overlapping signal logs, and a 3D model of a sleek ship hovering near the fringe of Virian territory. That, Virella said, pointing to the model, is the Marrowblade. It belonged to House Alaran's personal fleet. It was destroyed 3 months ago in an ambush. No survivors. Except Keela, Theo said. Exactly. We've been trying to piece together how she ended up in an escape pod that didn't exist on the Marrowblade's registry. Someone erased her presence, which means someone wanted her dead. Somebody faked an entire ship's manifest just to hide a kid? Not just a kid, a direct heir. She's biologically tied to the Alaran bloodline. That's political dynamite. Theo whistled. So she's not just adorable and stubborn. She's also the center of a galactic soap opera. We intercepted a signal last night, Virella continued, tapping the display. Encrypted, but we decrypted enough to identify a bounty. 30 million credits. For Keela. Alive. He went very still. Alive? Yes. Which means they want to parade her around before they do something worse. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Virella stared at the projection. This complicates your presence. You're now not just an inconvenient guardian. You're a vulnerability, a target. I've always been a target. Once a vending machine tried to kill me for taking 2 candy bars. This is not a joke. Nothing is anymore, but you'll need me. Virella glanced at him. How so? He leaned in. Because she won't trust anyone else. You saw it yourself. She'd rather hide under a crate than talk to someone in uniform. You want her safe? I stay. Virella didn't respond for a long moment. Then she nodded. You'll be assigned a security badge. You'll stay within designated areas, and you will follow orders. I've been a mechanic my whole life. Following orders is usually optional. She gave him a look that suggested optional wasn't in her vocabulary. As they left the chamber, the corridor lights dimmed suddenly. Theo stopped. Normal? Virella tapped her comm. Bridge, report. A voice crackled. Power dip. Something just docked. Unauthorized. Theo's stomach dropped. Define something. We're still identifying it. It looks like... The ship rocked hard. The lights flickered again, and an alarm howled through the corridors. Theo was already running. He didn't wait for permission. Didn't care if he violated a dozen protocols. All he knew was that Keela was alone and somewhere close, and something had just punched its way aboard a ship full of secrets. The door to his quarters was locked. He slammed his palm on the control panel. No response. He cursed, then turned to a nearby wall vent. "This is why I carry a wrench everywhere," he muttered, unscrewing the bolts and crawling into the tight shaft like a slightly panicked space raccoon. He emerged inside the room a minute later. Keela was crouched in the corner, holding a broken piece of piping like a sword. "You came back," she said, beaming. "Of course I came back," he said, scooping her up. "You think I'd let a bunch of weirdos in armor take my favorite co-pilot?" The intercom crackled again. "Borders in Section 7. Heavy resistance. Unknown species. Organic tech hybrid." Theo looked down at her. "You hear that?" Keela nodded solemnly. "Are they scary?" He grinned. "Not scarier than you before breakfast." "Should I get my jelly beans?" "Oh yes," he said. "Weaponize the whole bag." They left the room together, and for a second, the only sound was the click of small footsteps beside his own, echoing down the corridor of a ship that no longer felt so safe. But then again, nothing ever did when something worth protecting was at stake. The final blast doors groaned shut behind them, sealing off the chaos of Section 7 like an angry beast hiding its wounds. Theo caught his breath, Keela clinging to his side like a burr on a space sock, eyes wide but steady. Around them, the hum of Varela's edge returned slowly, like a sigh after a long scream. "We made it," Theo muttered, checking the small blaster holstered at his hip, and not a single jelly bean was harmed. Keela smirked. "Yet." Varela appeared at the end of the corridor, her long ears twitching with a tension Theo hadn't seen before. The intruders were an organic tech hybrid, part machine, part mercenary. Someone tried to buy her, then decided to take her. Theo wiped sweat from his brow. Do people still do that in this century? I thought buying people was so last millennium. Apparently not, Varela said, and someone here on board was helping them. Theo's eyes narrowed. A spy? Exactly. Keela tugged at his sleeve. Papa, who is the spy? Theo looked at her, smile softening. Someone who forgot how to be a decent person. They moved quickly, Varela leading them to the ship's central hub. The holographic interface pulsed with incoming signals, ship logs, and encrypted messages. Theo's eyes scanned the data flood, fingers itching to dive in. I found something, he said, pointing. This log shows communications between a faction called the Silent Blade and someone aboard this ship. They knew about Keela's location and planned the attack. Varela's face tightened. Silent Blade is a rogue mercenary group, known for merciless tactics, and they want control over the Alaran lineage for political leverage. Keela leaned against Theo. That sounds like bad guys. Bingo! The door hissed open, and a tall figure stepped in. Lieutenant Haran, Varela's second-in-command. We've secured the ship. The spy is in custody. Theo raised an eyebrow. So who was it? Someone with really bad taste in wardrobe? Haran smirked. No, but close. It was one of the engineers. Thought he could make a quick credit by selling information. Theo shook his head. Figures. I should have checked their toolbox for secret compartments. Keela giggled. You always check your toolbox. Like a pro. Varela looked between them and said, Enough joking. This is a delicate matter. The council will decide Keela's future. Theo's jaw tightened. I'm not handing her over to a room full of suits who see her as a political pawn. Varela's expression softened. She belongs to House Alaran, but you've become her guardian. That means something. It means a lot. Theo swallowed. I never thought I'd be guardian material. I'm just a mechanic who couldn't say no to a scared kid. And that's why you're exactly right for this, Varela said. Fatherhood isn't about biology. It's about presence, protection, love. Theo looked down at Keela, who was now fiddling with a loose panel on the wall. I think I'm ready to fight for her, no matter what. Keela looked up. You're my papa. Damn right I am. Days later, the ship's courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Varela stood beside Theo as he stepped forward, Keela clutching his hand tightly. The council elders were formidable, draped in the weight of tradition and expectations. Theo cleared his throat. Keela is more than an heir or a pawn. She's my daughter. Not by blood, but by everything that matters. I won't let her be just a symbol. A murmur spread across the room. One elder spoke. This is unprecedented, but love is not bound by species. Perhaps it never was. The verdict came. Keela would remain with Theo, under the watchful eye of Virella's crew. They would protect her, nurture her, and allow her to grow beyond the constraints of legacy. Theo squeezed Keela's hand. Looks like we're rewriting history. Virella's voice came softly. And you? How do you feel about all this? Theo smiled, looking at the alien woman with the long ears who'd taught him so much about honor and family. I feel like I've found a family I never knew I needed, and a daughter who's going to teach me how to be a better man. Keela tugged his sleeve. Papa, can we get ice cream now? Theo laughed. Only if you promise not to put jelly beans in it. The ship's engines thrummed, carrying them forward into uncertain stars and new beginnings. They were an unlikely family. Mechanic, alien commander, and a child of two worlds. Proving that family was not about where you came from, but who stood by your side. And sometimes, just sometimes, that made all the difference. The wind on Virel 9 didn't blow so much as wheeze, like an old man with a grudge dragging sand across the landscape in coughs and sputters. Isla stood in the middle of the junk dunes, arms at her sides, the last transport ship already a smudge in the overcast sky. Her ears twitched once, betraying a flicker of emotion, then stilled. Dust caked the corners of her eyes, and her cloak, gray, frayed, too small for her long limbs, clung to her like a memory trying too hard to stay relevant. She had no idea how long she stood there. Maybe an hour, maybe 5. Time moved differently after exile. When the scavenger bot approached, she didn't look up. It clicked, beeped, and tried to analyze her as if she were another piece of junk. It whirred, hesitated, then backed off with a sound that might have been robotic confusion. She sat on a half-buried hull plate and dug her fingers into the dust. The sand here was sharp, metallic, like the planet had been ground down by time and disappointment. A rumbling engine broke the silence. Ayla didn't react until the engine sputtered, coughed, and finally died with a theatrical wheeze. Then she turned, slowly, suspiciously. The vehicle was, well, it was technically a transport skiff, but it looked like someone had welded 3 bad decisions together and called it a design. From behind the cracked windshield emerged a human man with disheveled hair, grease-stained coveralls, and the kind of grin that made people suspicious for good reason. "You're sitting on my engine," he said, pointing. "That panel's from an old T-74. Junk's still got a bit of growl in it." She blinked. He frowned. "Or maybe it's not. Who knows anymore? Anyway, you planning to sell that cloak or just brood dramatically in the wind?" Ayla's eyes narrowed. "I don't sell things, and I'm not brooding. Could have fooled me. You've got the whole tragic silence of the desert thing going. Very popular in old Terran dramas. You should try sighing more. Really brings out the melancholy." She stood slowly, one hand hovering near her hip, where her dagger was hidden under the cloak. He didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. "Jake Marin," he said, extending a hand that was equal parts grime and bravado. "Local fixer, spare parts dealer, and semi-professional dodger of responsibilities." She didn't take the hand. "Isla. Nice to meet you, Isla. Mind if I ask what flavor of abandoned space princess you are?" She considered stabbing him. Just a little. Not fatally. Maybe in the boot. "I'm not a princess." Sure, I get it. You're the other kind of tragic figure. Disgraced heir, lost emissary, runaway from an intergalactic musical academy." She turned away. "Go away, Jake Marin. Fair, but see, here's the thing. I need that engine panel, and I can't really lift it with you sitting on it like a goth gargoyle." "Gargoyle? Ancient Earth thing. Ugly statues that look like they want to judge your life choices." She stepped off the panel, but not before scraping it with her boot, just to make a point. He examined it mournfully. "That's going to buff out, maybe, someday." He crouched, began adjusting cables and wiring, talking as he worked. "Not that it's any of my business, but this is a bad place to be alone. Between the sandstorms, the scrappers, and the occasional rogue AI looking for purpose, it's not exactly cozy." She crossed her arms. "And you're offering hospitality?" He looked up. "Number, I'm offering half a protein bar, and the promise that I only snore when I'm happy." She blinked. He held up the bar. Strawberry flavored. Kind of, if you squint your taste buds. It was the worst offer she'd ever received. It was also the only one. She took it, unwrapped it, and sniffed. This smells like insulation foam. Yeah, but it's pink. That's half the flavor battle. They sat in silence for a while, eating synthetic strawberry and watching the sky turn a deeper shade of bruised orange. You know, he said eventually, I don't usually pick up mysterious alien girls from the middle of nowhere. People think that's my thing, but really it's only happened 3 times. She raised an eyebrow. Okay, 2.5. One of them was a hologram. She almost smiled. Almost. You got a destination? She shook her head. I was supposed to disappear. That's the plan. He nodded slowly. That's a crap plan. It's the only one I had. Jake stood, stretching his back. Well, new plan. You come with me, help me avoid being murdered by my own clients, and in return, I'll teach you how to fix engines and insult people in 4 dialects of spaceling. Why would you help me? He shrugged. Why not? Everyone deserves a backup plan. Ayla hesitated. Then she followed him to the skiff. It groaned under their combined weight, lurched forward, and began crawling across the junk dunes like a lazy beetle. Just so you know, he said, I'm terrible company. I talk to myself, sing in the shower, and name my tools. What's the wrench called? Lady Thunder. She's temperamental. Ayla shook her head. You're an idiot. Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week. They rode in silence, the skiff wheezing and sputtering over the broken land, heading toward the rusted horizon. Somewhere out there was nothing, but now they'd face it together. The town of Crater's Edge wasn't much of a town. It was more of a determined gathering of rusted sheet metal structures, all crouched against the side of a ridge, like they were hiding from a very persistent tax collector. The sign welcoming visitors was half burned, and someone had scrawled, "Good luck," in red underneath it. Jake rolled the skiff into the main thoroughfare like he owned the place, which he absolutely did not. Try not to look too majestic, he told Ayla, as they passed the blinking remains of a vending drone that appeared to be weeping battery acid. The locals get twitchy around anything prettier than a radiator. She didn't respond. Her long ears twitched once under the edge of her hood. He leaned closer. And definitely don't mention interstellar politics, rare minerals, or your undying need for vengeance. That last one really kills the mood in a bar. I don't need vengeance, she muttered. Jake turned dramatically in his seat. Then what am I even doing here? No vengeance? No blood oaths? What happened to proper space drama? She looked at him sideways. You said I could learn how to fix engines. Oh, right, that. He parked the skiff in front of a building labeled Quarn's Repairs and Terrible Life Advice. The sign flickered pathetically. Inside, the repair shop smelled like ozone and broken promises. Tools hung from the walls in crooked rows, and a lizard the size of a small cat blinked at them from the countertop before waddling behind a container labeled, Definitely Not Explosives. Jake whistled. Quarn? You old mushroom, I brought you a protege. From the back, a voice like boiling gravel replied, If it breathes and doesn't owe me credits, I'm interested. Ayla stood still as a tall, wide creature shuffled into view. Quarn looked like someone had mixed a squid with a tool chest and dared it to live. He had too many eyes and not enough patience. She doesn't breathe like us, Jake said. It's a whole alien physiology thing. Very tragic. Big backstory. You'd love it. Quarn gave Ayla a slow look. Long ears. Ayla said nothing. Trouble, Quarn added with a nod. Good. The quiet ones always are. Jake grinned. She needs gear, tools, a safe place to not be found by the people looking for her, and she's got excellent balance. Didn't fall off the skiff once. That's your first compliment? Ayla said flatly. Balance is a very underrated skill in this line of work, Jake replied, opening a battered toolbox. You ever try rewiring a kinetic converter while it's on fire and also upside down? Didn't think so. Quarn grunted and waved a tentacle. She can stay, but if she breaks my grinder, I'm charging her for it in teeth. Later, after Jake left to procure supplies, which might have meant stealing, bargaining, or outright losing a game of cards, Ayla stood at the bench and stared at a disassembled pulse valve. The pieces didn't make sense. Not yet, but they had a logic, a rhythm if she listened hard enough. She moved slowly, cautiously, as if afraid the pieces might jump up and run. Quorn watched from behind a curtain of hanging chains. "You don't smell like the others." She didn't look up. "I'm not like the others." "No," he said. "You're not." They worked in silence for hours, the hum of machines filling the gaps where words weren't needed. Ayla found comfort in the weight of tools, in the satisfying click of a properly aligned seal, in the scent of hot metal. Here there were no judgments, just the honesty of repair. It's broken or it's not, and she could understand that. Jake returned at sunset, arms full of parts and a grin that threatened structural instability. "You won't believe what I traded for these," he said. "A hover kettle, a copy of Intergalactic Romance Monthly, and the promise of one heartfelt apology. Eventually." Isla raised an eyebrow. "You read romance magazines?" "Hey, those stories are emotionally rich and narratively sound," Jake replied. "And the cover art is wildly inaccurate, which makes them even better." Quorn slapped a tool onto the counter. "She's good. Not fast, but good." Ayla blinked. "That's a compliment?" "From Quorn, it's practically a love letter," Jake said. "I'm so proud I could weep oil." The three of them sat outside the shop later, under a sky that shimmered with a curtain of auroras from the nearby magnetite storms. Jake sipped from a canister of something definitely not safe for human consumption, and Quorn napped with his eyes open. Something Ayla tried not to think about too hard. "You still running?" Jake asked. "I don't know," she replied. "Well, wherever you end up, it's better with a wrench in your hand, or a good insult. Want me to teach you one in Rustonian?" Their word for spark plug is also a rather inventive curse. She shook her head, but there was a slight tilt at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile. Not yet, but close. "You're not like most humans," she said quietly. "True," Jake said, stretching out. "I'm charming, broke, and allergic to stability. But hey, at least I've got a cool ride. Your skiff caught fire last night. Spontaneous combustion is just passion in machine form." A meteor streaked overhead. Ayla followed it with her eyes, remembering the transport ship, the exile, the silence after betrayal. "You don't want to know what I did," she said. Jake shrugged. "Don't care. You're here. You're fixing broken things. That's enough." Silence settled between them again, but this time it was softer. Not the silence of emptiness, but of something growing. A space filled not with fear, but possibility. Quorn snored behind them, a deep, wet sound like a garbage disposal, considering its life choices. Isla looked at the stars. They didn't look like home anymore. But maybe that was all right. Ayla was up before the suns rose, already elbow-deep in a fusion pump that looked like it had lost an argument with a meteor and then been offended by the idea of repair. Her hands moved more surely now, guided by hours of practice, Quorn's grunts, and Jake's wildly inaccurate metaphors. She was learning to listen, not to voices, but to machines. Each bolt had a voice, each component a story. It was nothing like her world, where every word was guarded, every look a blade. Quorn shuffled past behind her, clutching a datapad and muttering about temporal dampeners behaving like lazy snails at a gravity rave. She didn't ask what that meant. She just nodded like she understood. Jake burst through the shop's side door, wearing goggles and grinning like someone who had just outrun a debt and gained a hobby in the process. "Good news, slightly worrying news, and news that requires us to pack quickly." Ayla didn't look up. "Let me guess. You offended someone powerful, made a deal you can't keep, and the authorities are now involved." Jake beamed. "You have been listening. I'm so proud. Also, yes. To all of that," Quorn groaned. "What did you promise this time?" Jake tossed a glowing orb onto the counter. It spun once and floated midair, pulsing faintly. "An Axion core?" Ayla blinked. "Those are illegal." Jake winked. "Only if you get caught. And technically, I didn't steal it. I just accepted it from someone who was very insistent that I leave before asking too many questions." "You're a magnet for morally gray artifacts," Quorn grumbled. Jake leaned in. "It's a gift. Like my smile. Or this eyebrow. He wiggled it. Also, the guy I got it from might have been followed, so we're probably going to need to relocate soon. Ayla sighed and set down the fusion pump. I just organized the flux cables. That's the real tragedy here, Jake said. They packed in under an hour. Quarn loaded his multi-legged crawler with his tools and muttered darkly about nomadic lifestyles ruining his arthritis. Jake tried to help, but mostly succeeded in tripping over things that hadn't previously existed. You ever considered a quiet life? Ayla asked, hoisting a crate. Jake raised an eyebrow. Have you met me? The new hideout was a maintenance outpost deep in the dune belt, where windstorms routinely buried entire buildings, and wild mecha fauna wandered around looking lost and mildly offended. It had 3 rooms, no ceiling in one, and a vending machine that only dispensed boots. Left boots. Jake kicked the machine. Who needs this many boots? Maybe it's a metaphor, Ayla said, for imbalance. Jake stared at her. That was almost a joke. I'm impressed. You're evolving. The Axion core sat in the center of the room like a smug secret. Ayla studied it with a careful eye. Its energy signature was unusual, like a pulse hiding under layers of noise. She reached out once, lightly, and it responded with a whisper of sound. Not a voice, a frequency. You hear that? She asked. Jake leaned closer. All I hear is the sound of us getting into trouble. Quarn entered, his eyes narrowed. That thing's not just power. It's broadcasting. Something old and angry. Jake frowned. So we throw it into the sun and go back to fixing skiffs? I want to understand it, Ayla said quietly. They didn't argue, not out loud. That night, while Jake snored loudly enough to scare away anything with ears, Ayla sat alone with the core. Her fingers hovered over the surface, not touching. She remembered the voices of her people, cold and clear, like crystal shattered on stone. The council, the judgment, the exile. She had asked a question no one dared voice, and for that they erased her. I asked why. Her words were barely breath. Why we kept pretending. Why we built silence on top of silence. They told me I was broken. The core pulsed. She reached for it, and it reached back. For a moment the room vanished. She was standing in a corridor of black glass, lightless yet visible, surrounded by whispers in a language she did not know but understood. Memories not hers flashed like sparks. Worlds lost. Decisions made in desperation. Machines dreaming of freedom. A door, a lock, and something waiting. Then it was gone. She blinked. Jake was standing over her, holding 2 mugs and wearing a concerned expression overtop his usual nonsense. You okay? She nodded slowly. I think it's a key. Jake sipped. To what? I don't know, but it remembers. Well, that's comforting, he said. Let's just hope it doesn't start singing. Last time I dealt with a sentient artifact, it tried to marry me. Was it pretty? Stunning. Eyes like plasma storms. But its mother didn't approve. Also, she was a satellite. Quarn wandered in, wearing a scarf that looked suspiciously like a reconfigured circuit wrap. We've got a signal. Someone's pinging the core. Ayla stood. Then they're coming. Jake sighed. We never get boring problems. No one ever just loses a cat or needs a light bulb changed. No, it's always the mysterious energy object and the ancient cosmic riddle. We could run, Ayla offered. Jake tilted his head. Do you want to? She hesitated, then shook her head. I want to know what it means. Why it found me. Jake smiled. Then we stay, and probably get shot at. She allowed herself a small smile. Probably. Outside, the wind began to howl, carrying dust and secrets. Inside, the 3 of them prepared. One with tools, one with jokes, and one with the weight of something long forgotten now awakening. They didn't know what was coming. But for the first time, Ayla wasn't facing it alone. The outpost hummed with a strange tension, like a song waiting to begin, its first note held back by breath and indecision. Ayla stood at the console they had cobbled together from salvaged drone parts and an ancient Terran stereo system that insisted on playing static unless you bribed it with heat. She stared at the pulse on the screen, a signal, clear now, echoing through the vacuum like a knock on a forgotten door. Whoever it was, they were getting closer. Jake lounged upside down on a metal crate, legs dangling over the edge, eating what he claimed were dried fruit slices and what Quorn insisted were fossilized garden clippings. Neither description filled her with confidence. "So," Jake said between crunches, "what's the plan when they arrive? Offer them tea? Pretend to be furniture? I do a mean lamp impression." Isla arched an eyebrow. "That explains your shining personality," Quorn snorted. "Don't encourage him." Jake tossed a slice at him. It bounced off Quorn's forehead and fell into a spanner bin, where it would likely fossilize further. "You said the signal matches the core," Alice said. "What does that mean?" Quorn pulled up a projection. "The core's a fragment. Whatever it belonged to, it's still out there. This signal is like its shadow. The bigger part is calling it home." "Then we follow it," she said. Jake sat upright so suddenly he knocked his head on a pipe. "I vote we don't follow the creepy ancient artifact that's whispering in frequencies. Let's do the opposite. Let's go on a beach vacation, somewhere with fewer sentient objects." Ella looked at him. "You said you'd stand with me." Jake rubbed his head and sighed. "You know, when I said that, I thought maybe we'd just fight some racists or steal a hoverbike. Not this." "Still time to back out," she said softly. Jake met her eyes. "Not a chance." They loaded the crawler, armed it with deflector shields, welded on some extra armor plating Jake found behind the outpost labeled, "Definitely not stolen," and headed into the dunes. The wind whispered secrets they couldn't quite catch, and the sky overhead was the color of a bruise trying to heal. The signal led them to a chasm. Not a natural formation, but a scar, jagged and precise, as if something vast and terrible had carved the planet open like a wound, and then walked away without apology. Deep below, machinery stirred beneath stone, flickering in forgotten light. Jake peered over the edge. "Well, that's friendly." Ayla checked the scanner. "Multiple energy sources. The core is resonating." Quorn adjusted his goggles. "It's like we're waking something up. Maybe we shouldn't." "We've come this far," Alice said. "I need to know why it chose me." Jake muttered. "Still voting for beach vacation." They descended into the chasm, rappelling off jagged rock faces and ducking beneath broken beams and ancient support structures. The air grew colder, charged with static, and the silence felt thick, like old dust layered over memory. At the bottom they found it, a structure, part ship, part temple, part machine. It rose from the stone like an accusation, covered in glyphs older than the standard calendar and humming with a low, mournful note that rattled teeth. The core in Allah's pack vibrated until she thought it might shatter. Jake whistled. "Well, this is probably cursed." Alice stepped forward. The door opened for her without a sound. Inside, lights flickered on, one by one, in recognition. "They know me," she whispered. Quorn's voice was hushed. "They knew someone like you." The walls pulsed with color, revealing murals, an alien race with long ears and blue skin, much like hers, but adorned in regalia, not exile. She saw herself reflected in 1,000 years of history erased. "They wiped this from the records," she said. "All of it." Jake walked beside her. "Looks like your people were more than just isolationists with bad manners." Quorn examined a console. "This isn't just a ship. It's a library, a vault of memory. Someone tried to lock it away." "Someone like the Council," Ayla said bitterly. The core flew from her pack, suspended mid-air, spinning faster and faster until it flashed with a blinding light and embedded itself into a socket at the center of the chamber. The hum rose into a chorus, lights cascaded through the structure, and then the hologram appeared. A woman, tall, regal, ears long, her eyes bearing the burden of galaxies. She looked directly at Ayla. "Child of the silence, blood of the question, you have returned." Jake took a step back. "Okay, nope. Did not sign up for ancient space ghosts." The figure smiled faintly. "We are memory, and warning, this is our last breath." Ayla stepped forward. "Why me?" "Because you asked, and they silenced you. But we remember. We remember what it means to seek truth, even when truth burns." Quorn murmured, "This is pre-fall tech, possibly pre-galactic cycle. This memory is older than most civilizations. The hologram continued. You must choose. Lock us away again or carry the truth forward. The weight is terrible. The burden, immense. But the lie cannot live forever. Jake looked at Ayla. You don't have to. We can walk away. She shook her head. I've already lost everything for asking why. I won't turn my back on the answer. She touched the console. The structure shook. Lights blazed. Data surged into her mind. Not images, but patterns, feelings, history. She staggered, overwhelmed. Jake caught her before she fell. Still here, he said. Still with you. Quarn steadied them both. We need to get out of here. Whatever you just unlocked, it's not going to stay quiet. They ran. Behind them, the structure rose from the chasm, shedding rock and dust, emerging like a titan. It was a ship. It had always been a ship, and now it was awake. Ayla looked up at it, eyes wide. It remembers, and it's coming with us. Jake stared. We're gonna need a bigger garage. The ship hovered above the desert like a god with amnesia, still shaking sand from its hull as if annoyed by the long nap. Ayla stood at the base of the boarding ramp, wind tugging at her cloak, the glow of the craft's heart pulsing in time with her own heartbeat. Around her, the outpost's few remaining structures creaked in protest against the sudden presence of something that had outlived stars. Jake squinted up at the ship. I was expecting, I don't know, more tentacles. It's a memory ship, not a horror movie, Ayla said, stepping aboard. Still time for a horror movie, Quarn muttered, clutching his datapad like it was a life vest. Inside, the ship greeted her like an old friend. Lights warming, air adjusting to her breath, panels sliding open at a touch. It wasn't conscious in the way a person was, but there was intention in its silence. It had been waiting, and now it had purpose. They gathered in what could only be called the nerve chamber. Thousands of threads of light weaving through the air, forming shifting shapes of language and history. The data flowed around Ayla, recognizing her as both descendant and vessel. The legacy wasn't genetic, it was will. She had chosen to carry the truth, and the ship honored that. Jake paced. So we've got a millennia-old memory fortress, a girl with all of her species' suppressed history in her head, and a scientist with anxiety allergies. What's the next step? Bake cookies and overthrow a government? Close, Ayla said, tapping a console. We go to the Council of Orin. Quarn choked. That's suicide. They'll vaporize us before we hit atmosphere. Not if they see the ship, she said. Not if they hear the truth broadcast across every channel. Jake sighed. You've really got a flair for dramatics. It's either brilliant or suicidal. Both, she replied, but that's always been our style. The ship lifted, silent and massive, cutting through the clouds like an ancient answer finally spoken aloud. As they broke orbit, the stars greeted them with a familiarity that made Ayla ache. This was her place, not in exile, not in silence, but moving forward with defiance and clarity. The Council's flagship loomed like a threat sculpted in gold and arrogance. As expected, they deployed interceptors. Ayla didn't flinch. The ship transmitted her message, bypassing encryption, saturating the entire system with light and sound. She appeared on every screen, every city, station, and dome. My name is Ayla. I was exiled for asking where we came from, for wondering why history had holes. I found the truth, not in myths or rebellion, but in memory. You erased your past to protect your power. I carry it now, and I won't let you bury it again. The ship projected the archives, images of her ancestors, of the silent war, of the decision to purge memory in favor of control. It was not vengeance, it was light, unavoidable, undeniable. The Council didn't fire. They couldn't. Across the system, people saw themselves in her. The questions she had asked were seeds, now planted in every curious mind. The silence cracked. Hours later, the flagship opened a channel. An elder appeared, gaunt and brittle, voice like dry wind. You have dismantled what we held sacred. Ayla's voice didn't waver. Then maybe it wasn't sacred. Maybe it was just convenient. You will be remembered as a heretic. Maybe. But I'll also be remembered. They didn't arrest her. Couldn't. She had become too large, too public. a symbol, reluctantly respected. The council fractured, reshaped by exposure. Truth had forced their hand, and now history demanded a reckoning. In the aftermath, the ship didn't vanish. It became a school, a sanctuary, a monument. Pilgrims came not to worship, but to learn. Jake led orientation tours, which involved frequent detours and snack breaks. Quorn wrote 4 volumes on pre-fall data structures and was asked to teach, an offer he politely declined with a scream. Ayla stood beneath the ship one morning, the sky clear, a new world emerging like a sprout from ash. Jake stepped beside her, arms crossed. "So you fixed a civilization," he said. "No big deal." She smiled. "I didn't fix it. I just reminded it who it was." Jake looked thoughtful. "Still, I think you're the only person who's ever used a spaceship as a history teacher." "I had help." He bumped her shoulder. "I'll take that as a compliment." They walked side by side through the growing crowd of students, historians, and question askers. No one pointed, no one whispered. They just followed, curious, hopeful, like she had once been, long ago, before exile, before silence. And in that quiet, Ayla knew the truth wasn't just something you found. It was something you chose to carry. Always.